Welcome back, Trailblazers. Before we dive into today's episode, I want to take a moment to talk about a tool that has completely transformed the way I plan and navigate my hikes, AllTrails Plus. As a Trailheads ambassador and the organizer of the Yakima Valley Trekkers, I'm out on the trails a lot. One of my favorite features of AllTrails Plus is the ability to edit and create my own maps. Conditions change, fallen trees, washed out sections, or even a last-minute reroute. And with AllTrails Plus, I can adjust my route on the fly and share it with others so everyone stays informed and safe. AllTrails Plus also gives you offline maps, wrong turn alerts, and 3D trail previews to help you stay on track and make the most of your adventure. And the best part, you can get 30% off an AllTrails Plus membership with my exclusive link in the episode show notes. So whether you're planning your next big trek or just looking for a new trail to explore, AllTrails Plus has you covered. Check it out and let's hit the trail. Welcome to Season 15 of the Hikes and Mikes podcast. I'm your host, Ivan, and each week we're hitting the trail through conversations with extraordinary hikers from across the United States and beyond. Summer is the season the high country has been holding its breath for. The pass is finally clear, the snowfields shrink back to the shadows, and suddenly the whole map opens up. Ridgelines we could only dream about in February are right there waiting. There's a particular kind of ambition that lives in these long days. The 4 a.m. alpine start, the meadows exploding with lupin and paintbrush, the cold shock of a glacier-fed lake at the end of a dusty climb. The light stretches on forever, and so does the sense that anything is possible up there. This season, I've had the privilege of sitting down with hikers who chase those big summer objectives, the long miles, the high summits, the trips that test what you're made of, and reward you with the kind of views you carry on for the rest of your life. Their stories are about going farther, reaching higher, and finding out who you become somewhere above the tree line. So fill the water bottles, check the forecast one more time, and get ready. Season 15 is here, and the conversations ahead are as wide open, sun-drenched, and full of possibility as a long summer day in the high country. For years, Christian O'Connor was what he calls a hardline gatekeeper, quietly discouraging people from the Arizona backcountry he grew up in. Then he became a guide. Christian traces the path from a Montreal kid dropped into the Sonoran Desert at age 5 to founding Backpack Arizona, the only overnight backcountry guiding operation working the Tonto, Coconino, and Apache-Sitgreaves National Forests. We get into the 2011 Wallow Fire that hardened him, the shift that changed his mind, and why he now believes access is the best chance wild places have. We also cover why he caps trips at 4 guests, the return, aka the moment discomfort snaps you back into your own body, and the biggest misconception about backpacking Arizona. Here's a hint. It isn't all saguaros. The Sky Islands climb past 10,000 feet. Christian also ranks the backcountry threats actually worth worrying about, and neither rattlesnakes nor bears take the top spot. Plus, we get into his brutal first backpacking trip, a yoga mat lashed to his Costco pack, 8 unnecessary liters of water, and a machete, the pack photo he takes at every trailhead, the Coca-Cola that carried him out of a canyon, and news on the new Tonto permit opening year-round superstition trips this October. Without further ado, let's jump into this episode with our guest, Christian. Welcome, everyone, to the latest episode of the Hikes and Mikes podcast. I have a really exciting guest with me today. His name is Christian O'Connor, and he's going to be sharing about backpacking Arizona, his trips, what he's doing there in Arizona to help people get outside and backpacking. Christian, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. We always like to start off by having our guests share a little bit about themselves and how they got started hiking.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Ivan. Believe it or not, I'm actually a city boy, originally from Montreal, Quebec, Canada, and my family relocated to Arizona when I was about 5 years old, to Fountain Hills, Arizona, of all places. And back in the early 90s, Fountain Hills was just a dusty desert town. And I remember when we moved there, we had 2 vacant lots, 2 of the sides of our house, one in the back and one right next door. There's a bobcat living in one of the back lots, and then we had a Gila monster come into our garage one time as well, and just all kinds of critters. And so I had a pretty unique childhood, I think, by today's standards. And my backyard is literally the Sonoran Desert. And I just spent time outside romping around and, a lot of time on my own and just sitting in the silence there. But my brothers, I come from a big family and have a few older brothers. And one of them, he was part of a tree planting crew in Alberta, Canada. And he got a taste for the outdoors. Enough of it to where when we moved here, he bought a used four-wheel drive truck and he was pretty fearless with it. He would just look and study maps and like, oh, this looks like it might be cool. Let me take the truck out and we'll just see where this road takes us. I absorbed that. That gave me confidence to start doing things on my own. But there was the really first camping trip and perhaps the first few set of camping trips that we had. And I remember one of those, we pull up to a car camping spot, dispersed, and it's out in the backcountry, no one else around. And there was a flowing perennial creek. And I remember getting out of the truck and peering into the water. It is crystal clear. And I saw wild trout swimming around. I was just blown away. We just drove 2.5 hours from the desert and looking at saguaros, and now we're high up in the Alpines. And there's this little piece of water here with wild trout living in it. And I still can't let it go. I still think that's really cool. And that just evoked a curiosity in me that, I don't know, just hasn't been, I'm still scratching that itch. And the outdoors from that point forward was always part of my life and continues to, just become a larger part of my life as well. So yeah, it's a little bit how I got started in the outdoors.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing that I really love about Arizona, especially if you live in the valley. You can go about 2-3 hours in any direction and you'll change landscapes to something completely different from the desert. I feel like those trips, especially those car camping and camping trips with your brother and your family, ignited this lifelong love for the outdoors. But you've also been candid and upfront about how you were reluctant to turn it into a business. Can you share a little bit about, what was the reluctance in turning this passion into a business?
Yeah, that's right. I was reluctant to start guiding and, sharing the outdoors and to turn it into a business. I guess that mentality started, probably when I was maybe, it was maybe a decade after living in Arizona. And when we initially moved here, Phoenix, I believe was the 9th largest city in the United States. And since then to today, it's now the 5th. And just a lot of people have poured in. While there's a lot of perhaps economic gain to be realized in the state, when people are looking to recreate, an easy option from the valley is to drive 2 hours up north to 7,000 feet above sea level. And you have cooler options. You could go from, I think today it's maybe 105 in the valley, but drive 2 hours, it's going to be 75 and quite enjoyable. And so with that pressure, I started witnessing places that were once a bit more solace, that were quiet, had more people coming in. And with that, I started to see damage being done, trash being left, bad manners, music being played, the solace and quiet that I was once seeking was being interrupted and disrespected. And I think really the hardest, or like a big turning point, and I think this, largely in Arizona as well, as far as outdoor recreation is concerned, and our public land, was in 2011. We had the Wallow Fire in the White Mountains, and yes, till to this day, it's the biggest wildfire in Arizona's history. It devastated the region, and places that were just like seared in my memory in childhood, like those core memories that stay with you. Going back to them, they're literally burned to the ground. And that fire was started when a couple people were backpacking, camping, and they walked away from their campfire. And when they walked away, it ignited and they couldn't control it. It was a result of human activity. And I turned in a harsher line within myself, and I took a bit more of a protectionist perspective. And I saw people accessing the public land as a direct threat to it. I thought at that time just out of anger, but also like fear. I was scared that we were going to continue to lose more and there was going to be nothing. I thought that my best chance of protecting it was to be a hardliner gatekeeper, be quiet about it, discourage people, even be rude, even off-putting. So, that was kind of the perspective that I was, let's call that my lowest. But around, I think, a lot of new ideas, or ideas that we see bearing fruit nowadays, the pandemic happened. And of course, it gave us a lot more time to think and ponder new ideas and possibilities, lifestyles. But in Arizona, more practically, we had a pretty significant wave of new people moving to Arizona. And with the extra time and telecommuting, I was suddenly seeing people further out than I'd ever seen before. There was access to new technology as well with, advent of, side by sides and ATVs. People are going out just a lot further than they ever have before and discovering more. And I had a moment to where, well, they're going to come anyway, and really, who am I to discourage that? And I think the best chance I have to saving the places that I love are to give people access to it the way I do. Let them see it through the perspective I've been fortunate enough to have. And the hope is by that sort of immersion and developing that connection with themselves and nature through backpacking, that they would then make decisions after the trip to benefit places, wild places, public land, and keeping things wild and sustainable for us. I mean, that was really just the idea that I was like, okay, well, I think I have to, put this into, how can I materialize this? And, I was thinking like, well, showing people how does that come to? And, one day read a job description for an overnight backpacking guide and they described me. Well, I knew there's kind of no turning back. Like there was just enough of that jar had been open that I'd always struggled with, finding a passion when it comes to work or, how I'm using my time. And I knew I had found it. I knew it was there. It was written for me. And I haven't been able to stop since.
Yeah, Christian, feel like a lot of people are feeling similar sentiments in the fact that you do start hearing more and more people saying, our public lands, especially popular places that have blown up on social media, have been getting too much love. They're getting loved to death. Here in Washington, we have the enchantments, but all along the West Coast, and even on the East Coast, there's places that just are popular and they can only support so many people. And, because more and more people are going out there, you're starting to see more and more trash, more and more people not following Leave No Trace. So I kind of understand where the mindset was for you, but I'd really love to kind of get your take of, you went from wanting to go further out and venture out and be in places where you could find peace and quiet on your own, to then shifting towards becoming a guide and actually taking people into the outdoors and into the backcountry and showing them Leave No Trace. Walk us through the steps of, once you saw that job posting and leading your first trip to deciding like, this is something that I want to do as a business.
I wish I could say that I was so determined and I was smart enough. I had a direct plan and, steps to follow. And it was somewhat laid out, or I created a path for myself there. But the truth is I didn't know what I was doing and I was a bit arrogant. I read the job description and I saw myself in it. And the first thing I'll say this about where the job description came from a certain large quote unquote co-op chain that used to have an adventure branch to it. And they were operating out of the Superstition Wilderness, just outside of Phoenix. And the job description was almost perfect to me until I got to the very end. I saw that there wasn't a lot of teaching involved. The guides were doing everything for folks, cooking the food, setting up the shelters. And it was kind of just a vacation for people, which is great. But I knew that I wouldn't be the best guide if that's how it was set up. And so I looked at where they were going and I looked at how much they were charging. For 3 days into Superstitions, we're on $1,500 and sometimes more. Somewhat arrogantly thought like, oh, I could take people to much cooler places for a lot cheaper. I grew up here. I know this. I have a deep connection with these areas and I can curate a very unique experience. And so I was like, oh, well, if nobody else has this in place for myself, I'm going to build it. And so it started, okay, well, how do I become a guide? I figured there's probably some permit process. So I called one of the national forests. I think I connected with the other Kaibab or Prescott. And, that's when I heard like, oh, well, to even apply for a permit, you need a wilderness first responder certificate. Oh, what's that? Oh, it's an 80-hour course. So then I was like, okay, so that's a hurdle. But I was so determined. I still was driven by this description and kind of what I was doing in the mission here that I didn't look past each step. Like I just saw one at a time. It's just like, okay, here's the next hurdle to guiding. Here's the next hurdle. But I think that served me in many ways. If I knew just how laborious it would be in really a regulatory environment, which for good reason, I don't know, maybe I would have made some different decisions at some lower points for myself. But yeah, it was just kind of this I don't know, determination and just like nothing, there's no obstacle too great. Get the permit and, I'm pretty scrappy. I couldn't do things conventionally. I didn't have, it's just me. I'm just one person. I'm about just over 4 years in. And yeah, so that was the journey to seeing that job description. And now it's, and I would say it's still a work in progress, but, the infrastructure and a lot of the brand building and relationship building too, it takes time. And it's interesting when I tell people what I do, because I'm actually, as far as I know, as of now, the only overnight backcountry guide operating where I do in the Tonto, Coconino, and Apache-Sitgreaves National Forests. And I was kind of flabbergasted when that happened. Everyone seems to be focused on Sedona and the Grand Canyon. And people I know who are just as outdoor savvy as I am and have similar experiences. And you tell them that I'm a guide, and you kind of see the wheels turning. And people, I don't think this idea of guiding these forests is uniquely mine. I think people have had it before, but it's the steps, the regulation, the really the devotion, time devotion. You have to be a little illogical about it. And so you can see how it perhaps filters people out. I often compare the analogy I use for kind of what I'm doing and starting, how it feels starting from scratch and not really having anything else. I feel like I moved to Hollywood for pilot season and I'm trying to make it as an actor. And the statistics and odds are just, they're stacked against me, but I can't stop. This very much feels like a calling and I feel pulled to it. And once I put in X amount of effort, I couldn't stop. And I love it too much. This is my first time I've had a love and a passion for any sort of work I've done. And I even still struggle to call it work. It still feels weird. This is what my favorite thing to do.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are chasing that to do something that they can get paid at, but it doesn't feel like a job or work, kind of like a passion project. Now, I do want to talk about your trips because you kind of touched base on it. You're steering away from popular places like the Grand Canyon, Sedona, and are focusing on some of the beautiful national forests in and around the valley. But you're also capping your trips to, I believe it's only 4 guests. How much of that was instinct, like that same instinct of protecting the experience from turning into the exact thing that you were originally trying to get away from?
I guess starting with like the group size, that was pretty obvious to me. I knew I'm somebody who's struggled with social anxiety throughout my life, and I think that's fairly common to some form with many people. And a lot of times, like I would struggle with big group dynamics. When I think back to the more profound backcountry experiences I've had with others, it was always in small group, intimate settings, and I didn't necessarily want a guided trek with me to feel like you were necessarily signing up for a trip. I wanted the feeling that you're going with friends that you know, and it's a small group, and we're all kind of experiencing this together and feeling it together. And capping it at 5 people too also keeps group dynamics a little looser with people. I find people are more likely to be engaged, and there's a little bit of a comfort level too when you're getting used to 4 other strangers, as opposed to a dozen. And yeah, so I really wanted to feel like, going with a local, somebody who's grown up here and knows an area, they're going to show me some cool places, and I'm just going to tag along, and, they're going to take care of, all the gear and planning and make it easy for me.
I feel like you have thought of some great analogies about your experience as a guide, and I'm fairly early in my backpacking, season. I've only had a few under my belt, and I love your comparison of when a group or when a guest joins you in the backcountry. It's like leaving your home country for the first time. You land, nothing makes sense, and turning back isn't really an option. But then you got this guide who kind of speaks the language. Has a guest ever actually hit that moment, like right on schedule, especially like at the trailhead, or maybe it's once you reach camp?
Rarely ever at the trailhead. It's on the way to camp, usually. That reality kind of sets in that you're somewhere different, that this is, you're here and in it, and there's a level of discomfort that could come with that. So on the trek to camp, I think people sometimes will carry certain expectations of what difficulty actually means. And while I can communicate the specific difficulties and things that we're going to encounter, people don't really know how it's going to make them feel in the moment. For example, some of my routes are pretty short. You'll see on the map 3, 4 miles, sometimes a little less. And the perception is we can get there pretty quickly. But when we get down to the canyon, if you drop 800 feet, your legs are a little shaky. You're like, oh, okay, I wasn't expected to feel this tired so soon. And then, take a little break. And then when you start trekking upstream and you realize that to go a quarter mile is very tedious. You have to cross streams and navigate boulders. And people have, I think, different pet peeves on a trail. For me, I get really dragged down when I have to bushwhack a little bit, when there's bushes and like leaves touching me. I have sensitive skin anyway, so it just kind of like, it feels uncomfortable to me. And if I'm sweating, it's just like, it's kind of a bad sensory experience in that moment. And some people, like, it just hits them differently. It's like, oh gosh, this is hard. It's also beautiful as well, because in that moment, I call it the return. We return to our bodies. We return to the present moment, and we're paying attention to where we are. We're beaten down somewhat, and it's just like we have no choice just to focus on that. Our aching bodies, we're sweating, we're uncomfortable, maybe we're wet from the water. Our, bottoms of our feet are sore from all those, all the uneven terrain and rocks, and you're going to pay attention to that. And I think it's beautiful because it's sometimes very hard for people to accomplish that in other settings. It certainly was for me to bring myself to the present moment. I've had jobs in corporate America and working late nights and carrying that stress of a desk job and always thinking about like what you have to get done. And then there's artificial stimuli coming and being presented to you. And it's just much harder to actually pay attention to your body, to what hurts. And, for me, when I'm out there and that kind of that moment that happens with people when they return to themselves, it's amazing when that you bring that back into your, civilian life, let's call it, because you're going to all of a sudden pay attention to I wasn't noticing my body, felt this way here. I should make an adjustment. And, it's kind of like maybe a bit of shock therapy. Let's say that happens out there. So, but I can't predict it. While, yeah, the trek to camp can do it, I've seen it the trek back where just, I don't know, it's like the fatigue or tiredness, or they maybe didn't sleep as long as they had before, and it just catches up to them. And that's why I'm there. Is my value as a guide is to pay attention to that for you, because I've lived it, I've experienced it, and I still do every time, to just varying levels. It's just maybe not as significant, or, I focus on something else, but I'm, there to get your back. And also I can sometimes see it, like they're kind of that moment of, they're going to have, I don't know, maybe an emotional period right now, or there's like, they're going to have some sort of episode of realization, it's tuning in to that. And part of my job as a guy, what I really had to learn to do is not only tune into myself, but then, feel into what other people are experiencing out there. And so, but yeah, like it's one of those things that, because of that shock, kind of that initial, like, oh my goodness, this is a lot. It forms memories. You remember that you're going to carry that with you outside of this. And so, yeah, I think, it's not something to be dreaded. It's something to be, I think, celebrated, honestly. It's just amazing what it can do for you.
Now, Christian, you are 4 years plus into your journey as a guide, but you've also spent a lot of time outdoors in Arizona, not just hiking, but backpacking. I've shared this in previous episodes. Before moving to Arizona, I had a big misconception of like, it's just desert, right? So I'm wondering, for you that has had a chance to explore different regions of the state, what's the biggest misconception people have about backpacking in Arizona?
Oh, so many. It's hard for me to speak to maybe a perception of Arizona outside of the state, but I think sometimes people maybe get the inclination that Arizona is a little bit of America's Australia. We have all the poisonous snakes and scorpions, and the jaguars coming in, Gila monsters, poisonous. Like, I don't know, we have some spookier stuff, not to mention like all the lore of some of our areas, like the superstitions or Pleasant Valley, places like that. But I think, and maybe this isn't just unique to Arizona, but the misconception is like just how accessible it is and how much is close by. And I really wish people realize their power and their capability. And oftentimes I say, like, people would ask me, oh, who's your biggest competition? Like, what are you going up against? And I just say people's limiting beliefs about themselves. Humans can do, have done and can do still pretty cool and amazing things. And so, like, part of what I like to do is remind people of that. And so I think people may look at what I do or think I don't know. I mean, I guess I am a bit hardcore. I mean, I started a business around it, but it can be done. And I think when I started backpacking, I was a car camper first. And my motivation for backpacking was, as we alluded to earlier, was just to get away from people. And backpacking, because it's harder and just, more steps involved, less people would be likely to put in that effort. But it became simpler to me the longer I do it. I mean, it's food, water, shelter. And I've been shown over and over again just how little I need to thrive. And to give you an example, I love fly fishing. I'm a huge fly angler. In fact, if someone asks me like kind of what my brand of outdoors, I say fly fishing before backpacking. And I backpack to access amazing trout waters. But in order for me to do that well in a backcountry setting that takes a lot of effort to get there, I have to take care of myself and, food, water, shelter. And by golly, we don't need that much to feel great and to be able to do fun things like that. So yeah, I wish people, their perception was that they could trust themselves. But as it relates to perhaps Arizona a little bit more specifically for backpacking, it's just the diversity of options we have. I mean, if you take the Sky Islands just by themselves, and when I say Sky Islands, so in southern Arizona, they're essentially these monoliths, little mountain ranges that just erupt from the earth, where it's flat and plain lands all around it. They're called islands because they are isolated, and they'll go up, up to 10,000 feet in some cases, and you start thinking of the desert floor, and then up to 10,000 feet, and you have ponderosa pines, blue spruce, a completely different climate zone. And then you have all the climate zones in between. And so one thing that Arizona, I think, has over most other states is your options to adventure year round. This New Year's, for example, I plan to backpack in the Superstitions. It'll still be cold, but it's not closed off. I can get there. I'm able to do that because it's a lower elevation. And then as, we get into spring, I could go up into the high desert, around 4,000, 5,000 feet where we have juniper pines, and it's more canyon lands and just kind of a land of extremes. And then, as we get into the warmer months, I take it up to 6,000, 7,000 feet and above. And, I'm in alpine forest, and it looks very similar to Colorado. So just, being able to go from saguaros to pine forests with such ease, pretty short drive outside of Phoenix is just, it's amazing. I don't know. I think it's probably my favorite thing about living in Arizona. Yeah, I can say that for sure. Is just our ability to do things all year round.
Yeah. And, you kind of touched base on it. I do want to circle back on this. I think a lot of people, especially when they think of Arizona and the West, they assume rattlesnakes, bears, cougars. But you've actually ranked the 3 to keep your eye on, especially there in Arizona. And neither rattlesnakes or bears make your top spot. Why is that? And then what is your top spot?
The first one, rattlesnakes. Yeah, it's one of those things like, if you leave them alone, they'll leave you alone. And with a little bit of like mitigation steps, you're going to be okay. Additionally, like where rattlesnakes are really prevalent in Arizona, is the lower elevation ranges in Sonoran Desert, but they're coming out in the summer when it's hot, and you're not likely to be adventuring as much out there. Now, we do have a rattlesnake, a Arizona black rattlesnake up in the high alpines, and they're by far, I think, the coolest looking snake we have in the state, but they avoid you. They want to get away from you. Every time I see one, like it's kind of by accident, or they're slithering away, or yeah, it's a very easy thing to avoid. And then, bears, well, Arizona, we only have black bears. We killed our last grizzlies in, I think, the 1930s. So unfortunately, we don't have them anymore. But, black bears, and they're, of course, a bit more timid. And if you look at the black bear attacks in Arizona, in almost every case, they take place in less of a backcountry setting, in neighborhoods that brush up against the forest, or even designated camp areas where there's more people, popular areas, and the bears are a little acclimated. Every time I've run into a bear backpacking or, the backcountry, they don't encounter humans as much, and they're taken off. That's not to say that one would get curious, or, there could be like fluke encounters, but statistically, if I'm thinking about, animals causing me a headache or worse in the backcountry, bears, lower on the list for me. But the one that does worry me, though, are pack rats. They're resilient, they're patient, prevalent, and just to give you an example, there's some canyons I guide into where access is difficult even for big predators, and there's maybe not necessarily as much game down there. So it allows some instances, pack rats, the population to thrive a little bit more. While it hasn't happened to me yet, if you are in a spot for more than 2 nights, generally, and this doesn't just speak to pack rats, but the wilderness surrounding you gets used to you. I don't know if you've ever stayed in one camp spot for longer than 2 or 3 days, but things get used to it. Like you kind of become part of the routine there. And pack rats will get comfortable with you, and they will wait till you're gone on a day hike or something, and they will chew through anything and everything. And they will ruin your gear on their way to get it. For example, if you have some food in your tent, in your backpack, and a pack rat smells it, well, they're going to start chewing through your tent. They're going to find your pack somewhere in the pack, start chewing through your pack, and then whatever else is in the way to finally get to the calories. That can cause you a bad time. I mean, if you lose your sleep system, for example, or if they like sleeping bags in the way, like it can really, be not good for you. And they're prevalent, and you're much more likely to encounter them. So yeah, that's where like I really take the most mitigating steps.
Now, I would say the things that have caused most damage to my gear have been the rodents, if anything. They'll definitely get to food. If they smell it, they'll get to it somehow, even though there's multiple barriers.
The pack rats we have up north too, they're nocturnal, so they have bigger eyes, and they're cute. So they're very, very deceptive little devils.
Now, I did want to touch base on your website, Christian, because, the one thing that really caught my attention is it talks about especially being passionate about guiding people who haven't had a chance to get into the backcountry before, whatever the barriers have been. In your personal experience, is there a specific guest that kind of comes to mind when you think about why that matters to you, about getting people into the backcountry that haven't had that chance?
I think it's fair to say, historically, that there's a lot of privilege that can come with being able to access some of the places I do, in addition to the knowledge, but also having the resources to get there, a vehicle, the proper gear, and knowing how to use that gear. And so what I've noticed growing up in Arizona, and it was similar to me, although I was lucky I just got enough from my brother, but I would ask like other backpackers I would meet or hunters or people who fly fish, like, how did you get started in this? Like, what drove your interest? I noticed it was a little different for me. My interest was my own. That's how I was introduced to backpacking, but most other instances, it's almost hereditary. They learn it from a family member. My case is my brother, as far as just accessing or having the confidence to access the outdoors, but a lot of people learn it from their parents as well, particularly like hunters and fishing, and there's almost like knowledge about the water that's passed down. And, I think that's neat and beautiful all on its own, but it's just not fair to me. It's just, I know there are people who want to do or go to the places I do, but just it's daunting. And so I suppose like if I had people come to me for all sorts of reasons, but somebody who's looking to learn more, and I imagine just like moving to Arizona and not knowing anybody and wanting to learn stuff about the outdoors is like, where do you begin? I mean, we've already discussed that you could camp in the desert, high desert, alpine, go to the White Mountains, Rim, Superstitions, Grand Canyon, Sedona, Sky Islands. It's overwhelming. And so I imagine that even if they do try, if they get kind of past the overwhelming information that's being presented to them, perhaps like you wanted to try camping and you go to, I don't know, a designated campground near a lake and you're hoping for quiet and solitude, but you're going to have people around you. You're going to hear music playing. You'll likely hear people shooting firearms in the distance all the time. I imagine there are people who they know there's more. They could go deeper. They can get further back, but they're just not quite sure. And then there's also the safety element, like, oh, I'm far back here. Like, if I twist an ankle, like I need to be a bit more cautious. So I wanted to be a resource for people who didn't have that privilege of learning backcountry skills and locations and access through hereditary means or through their parents, or even if they had financial resources as well. Sometimes I think people will get the perception that there's a certain gear that's really expensive, and then there's you kind of can't get around buying a good sleeping bag, for example, and there's certain costs that do come with that. But I wanted to sort of supersede that and give somebody an opportunity to try it without dropping all that money, and to give it a whirl and to actually experience nature on a deeper level than they couldn't necessarily experience on their own. I wanted to provide that opportunity for others to show that, they can go a little bit further, and I'm going to get them there in an easy, digestible fashion for them.
Oh, that's awesome, Christian. Yeah, this podcast is all about getting people outdoors, especially those that didn't have the means or the opportunities to do it growing up. So I really appreciate you leading that there in Arizona and providing a safe experience for people to get outside and enjoy the outdoors. We like to do a regular segment here on the podcast, Christian, where we do a deep dive into our guest's Instagram account, and we like to kind of pull up a post and ask them to share a little bit more about it. And the one that caught my attention, because I just talked about my backpacking evolution recently, is you shared a post about your first pack, which was, I think, 12 years ago. You had a yoga mat that was strapped to a Costco backpack. 2 cold nights is what you said. And you also said you felt compelled to bring a machete for some reason. Can you share a little bit more about that pack from 12 years ago and that experience?
Oh, it was so heavy. It was so heavy. And the weight distribution was so bad. There are sharp points in that pack poking into me. I will never live that one down. Yeah, so that my first time backpacking, I had a friend who was very experienced. And in connecting with him and planning the trip, and I think I was perhaps embellishing a little bit of my like backcountry prowess and capabilities a little bit. Because I quickly, like when I started doing my pack, I realized I had no clue. Yeah, it's kind of like dude fashion. I didn't really do any research on what I should bring. I had this experience as a car camper, and I was able to miniaturize some pieces of gear. It was just brutal. I can't tell you how heavy it was. We got some bad intelligence too of the area, that there wasn't necessarily going to be water. And we found that out a couple days before the trip, and just we didn't have time to plan anything else or figure anything else. So I actually carried, I think, like 8 liters of water with me. The hike wasn't even really that, it's about 5.5 miles, and like it had difficult sections. You're kind of going, some switchbacks, but you're also going up and down in elevation because it's in a canyon. And there's certain parts where you go down to the canyon floor, but then have to go back up. And, that was a little tedious, but it was nothing like technically difficult. But because my pack was so heavy and I had that water and I brought superfluous items like a machete, by the time we got to camp or found a spot, like my hips hurt so much, my feet and legs were so fatigued that I spent the rest of the trip just recovering. All I did really was set up my tent and just kind of just like hobble around and rest the whole time. And my friend who was prepared, he enjoyed the area and he was taking like little side trips. He was telling me about all the, some of the wildlife he was seeing. And there's a moment where it was like getting to the, seeping into the evening of our second night. And he said, I'm going to drop down to the canyon and pick up some water. It turns out there was water there. So I picked those 8 liters for no reason. But I remember watching him, he didn't really go that far. It was maybe a 300-foot walk, and then he had to drop into the canyon, and it was on a trail, and it wasn't many obstacles, but I thought of that moment, like, I was like, oh God, that would hurt so much for me right now. That looks Herculean, like what effort I would have to expend just to go that little distance to get water. And in that moment, my perception of like distance and time was just kind of evaporated. Being out here, I knew it just wasn't the same. I wasn't in control. I had to submit to this experience and just endure. And my only chance for self-preservation is just to rest and then to hike out of there. So yeah, I had no choice but to endure. But my goals for that trip were accomplished. We found a beautiful backcountry spot. Didn't see anyone. It was incredible. It was in the high desert, and we had these cottonwoods and sycamores around, and it was covered in juniper pines, and saw all sorts of animal tracks. Like, it was just absolutely incredible. When I got back, I quickly forgot about it. I forgot about that pain, and I wanted to do it again, and I was hooked.
I still look back at my pack from 3 years ago, and I kind of shiver at the thought of putting it on because it was so dang heavy. And especially this year where I finally got under 20 pounds as a base weight, packing 35 to 40 pounds to, almost half that is a game changer when you're trying to enjoy the outdoors. It takes some lessons. It took me 3 years to really dial in and figure out what I need, what I don't need. So it just takes time. I think a lot of people have that first backpacking experience where, it's a learning experience. Now, Christian, that was it for your personal questions. This next segment of the podcast is questions that we like to ask all our guests. The first one is, do you have a pre-hike ritual or a first mile mindset?
I do, actually. I didn't always have one, but what I started doing is before I put on the pack and start on the trail, I lean it up against my truck or a tree or something, and I take a picture of it. And that's the mark of the start of the trip for me. It's sort of like if you're making a movie and they kind of like the marker shows the beginning of the scene and which take it is. That's sort of like my start marker, and I use that to keep track of the times it takes to get to camp because it varies based on weather conditions and people. So I'm a bit of a data nerd, and so I like to track that.
And then this one's going to be a tough one because I feel like one thing that I definitely miss about Arizona is just the variety and diversity of food options there. So in your experience, what's your go-to post-hike meal or drink?
Yeah, this was actually established on my first backpacking trip. I don't have too big of a sweet tooth and don't drink like Coke or like sugary fizzy drinks very often. Sprite, Coca-Cola, especially, whatever. But on our first trip after the afternoon of the second day, for whatever reason, I was missing carbonation, and I was just thinking like a cold Coca-Cola just sounds really good right now. And I said that to my friend, and he's like, yeah, it does. And that sat with us. Because that first backpacking trip, I was so beaten down and tired. I was having anxiety about the hike out and just if I was going to be able to do it. But I started thinking about that drink. I started thinking about that cold Coca-Cola that I'm going to grab out of the fridge at the first gas station we see, and how amazing it's going to be when it hits my lips. And Ivan, I carried me through that hike. It was sort of like the carrot on a string that I just kept chasing. Then I could forget about my discomfort in that moment and just think, oh, this is going to be I had a real attainable goal.
Now, this next one is about gear. What's the one piece of gear you'll never compromise on?
That's tough. There's certain things that I like to do to make me feel human. And one of them, probably think about the most, is being dry and having shelter, or just getting a little bit out of the elements. And so, it's Arizona in July, so monsoons are in full swing. And if you're taking a day hike up north, there's a good chance you're going to encounter an afternoon thunderstorm. They'll happen suddenly, and even if they're not on the weather radar. And so I will carry with me a tarp with guy lines that I could quickly string up between trees, and then I have a shelter, and I'm out of the wind and I'm out of the rain and I'm dry, and I can think, and I could just kind of focus on myself and getting comfortable. I say the tarp with the guy lines and clips, it allows you to throw that around trees very quickly and get it up in a matter of, I could get my tarp up in less than 2 minutes now. The amount of comfort it brings, and just you feel much better. You improve your situation just a little bit. I don't know, it fills you with a little bit more joy. You feel a little bit more yourself.
Now, on the flip side, Christian, what's the most overrated piece of outdoor gear that you've experienced?
I'm suspicious of anything that says it's tactical as multifunction. I find that things that are multifunction, they do either function kind of with mediocrity, and they often break. So I'm suspect of those.
Yeah, I forget what the saying is. I think it's jack of all trades, but master of none. Now, the last question, Christian, is, we're halfway through 2026. There's still plenty of time to enjoy the outdoors, especially there in Arizona. But do you have any hiking or backpacking goals for the remainder of the year, or anything exciting on the horizon that we should look out for?
Yeah, I think there are two things that folks can look forward to. One of which is Backpack Arizona. We recently landed the Tonto National Forest guiding permit, and this gives us access to places like the Superstitions and areas off the Verde River and Mazalsa Wilderness, and so Sonoran Desert and High Desert. And this is going to allow us to guide year-round for the first time. And so in October is when we're going to start our first trips to the Superstitions and the High Desert. So very excited about that. It's going to impact the brand a little bit because now, it's been alpine focused, but now we're going to start including saguaros and those juniper pines, which was, what I originally hoped. And I'm just really excited to bring that part and be able to, share more of the state with people. The other thing folks can look forward to is there's a bit of somewhat of maybe a small pivot, but last year I had several experiences that could only be described as Sasquatch related, unexplainable, mysterious. And I had some pretty cool encounters and experiences. And so those are stories that I'm looking to share over the rest of the year, and I know some things will probably be strung out a little bit over time, but currently exploring avenues and how to tell those stories.
Awesome, Christian. Well, we can't wait to see your first backpacking trip there in Tonto, see the pictures online of that experience. We're going to get to the last segment of the podcast, the this or that questions. They're all hiking related. I'm going to give you two options. You just choose which one you prefer out of the two. But the first one is, do you track a hike or do you turn off tracking?
Oh, I'm turning it off. Well, I want to focus in and on the moment.
And now this one might be a difficult one, but when it comes to hiking and backpacking, are you more of a home range backpacker and hiker, or do you prefer the destination travel?
That is tough, but I'm going to go with home range. I've been romping around Arizona, hunting, fishing, car camping, backpacking, all sorts of different things and all over the state. I'm not even close to seeing it all.
All right. And then the next one is, are you a trip report writer or a trip report reader?
I like to write, so I don't know. I don't mind writing trip reports, yeah.
And then we kind of touched base on this already, but if you had to choose between these 2 miles, are you going to choose the first mile of the hike or the last mile of the hike?
I'm going to go with the last mile. There's a certain giddiness, but there's also kind of the thrill of you experience all these different kind of emotions. Like you think it's close, but it just, maybe it's not, or like you think it's over the next horizon, but you're still like, I don't know, you're just sometimes not sure, but it's close. And so there's kind of like this unsure excitement. And yeah, there's also like when you finally get there and just the relief and the feeling of accomplishment.
Now this next one's new for season 15. And in this one, it's a little bit different because you can only choose to remember one. The one that you don't choose is wiped from your memory, but the choices are the trail that broke you or the trail that made you.
It happens when they're one and the same. I don't mean that kind of as like a sidestep, but the ones that broke me also, yeah, they made me too. Those experiences, for one, are just seared within me. I have a friend, and he's gonna never let me live it down for quoting him, but he once said, camping's fun because it sucks. And he followed it up saying, like, think about any time you were camping, friends, family, and just something goes wrong. Like the rain comes and the weather turns, and I know you're just uncomfortable, but you kind of have to huddle together and deal with it. And, oftentimes you're left laughing at the sheer ridiculousness of it. But like in those moments of like kind of unsureness or like, this is lame, it didn't go as planned, we won't be able to experience this. It's something special often comes of it, and something that carries with you, I think, on a deeper level than, if things just went according to expectation.
So the next one is about your footwear, trail runners or hiking boots.
Used to be a strict booter, but I'm kind of settling into the trail runners a little bit more, as long as they have good drainage, because I'm hiking in and out of rivers and creeks and stuff. So as long as they could handle the water, I'm happy.
And then this next one's going to be tough because Arizona has both of them, but desert heat or alpine cold?
Alpine cold. I'm Canadian born. It's in my blood. I've struggled with the heat my whole life, and it's kind of funny for somebody who grew up as a desert rat. But yeah, I like the cold. I like that, feeling the cold go in my nose, and I don't know, I dig it. It's cozy to me.
And then Arizona is known for having both of these in stunning fashion. But if you can only choose one, spring wildflowers or fall colors?
I got to go with fall colors. My birthday's in October, and a big reason of that is, Arizona and living in the valley, it's so hot, triple digits all summer. But then, fall comes around, the fall colors, it's just like you start getting that taste of the temperatures dropping a little bit. And I don't know, there's just like a palpable excitement in the air in Arizona when fall comes around. So yeah, I lean towards that.
And then this next one is about the different types of fun in the outdoors. Type 1, Type 2, and Type 3 fun. But if you had to choose, would you choose Type 1 or Type 2 fun?
I think historically it'd be Type 2. But I'm trying to do a little bit more Type 1 stuff and just, maybe go a little easier on myself sometimes. Although sometimes I find that my definition of Type 1 fun is Type 2 fun for other people. So
now the last one, Christian, is if you had to choose between these two, are you choosing backpacking or day hiking?
Oh, yeah, backpacking. I think there are things that get missed if you only day hike. I like to connect with that environment and see it throughout everything, through all its morning and night, and the transition, from dusk into night, and hearing all the sounds and seeing what comes through. I want to experience that. I can only do that backpacking. Yeah, I just like that extra connection.
Awesome. Well, that was it, Christian, for the this or that questions. For folks that want to learn a little bit more about your upcoming trips, see some of your previous trip pictures, where are some of the places they can find more information about backpacking Arizona, both online and on social media?
Yeah, so Backpack Arizona, we have our Instagram is just at Backpack Arizona, and it's a place where we like to share some educational content and also trip logs and kind of a little bit of a blog and share just what we're experiencing. And we have a lot of our trip pictures and videos, and I'm very proud of the content that we've been able to put together, and the places we go are just extraordinarily beautiful. So our Instagram at Backpack Arizona is a great place that showcases it. And as far as finding more information about the business and our trips specifically, you could visit our website at backpackarizona.org, and we have our upcoming trip schedule in addition to information, FAQs, really just everything that we provide for guests. And it's whether it's your first time backpacking and you haven't even slept outside to or if you're really experienced, we have ways of we can curate just about so many different outdoor experiences. Our locations are even more diverse, and so we're able to help guests meet just about any backcountry goal. More information about that could be found at backpackarizona.org.
Awesome, Christian. We'll be sure to put both those links in the episode show notes so people can check it out. Well, it has been a blast to speak with you, Christian, and especially talking about Arizona. I can't wait to see what the rest of 2026 has to offer you and the business, but thank you so much for taking the time out of your evening to speak with us.
I appreciate it, Ivan. Thank you so much.
And that brings us to the end of this episode alongside Christian. We extend a heartfelt thanks to him for coming on the podcast. Be sure to follow him on Instagram at Backpack Arizona. And for more, be sure to check out the episode show notes. New episodes will drop every Monday throughout the summer hiking season, with the occasional Friday bonus episodes along the way. To make sure you never miss a moment of these inspiring trail stories, hit that follow or subscribe button. Your support truly keeps this community moving forward, one episode at a time. Don't forget to connect with us on Instagram at Hikes and Mics. That's where you'll find behind-the-scenes episode visuals, my own summer hiking adventures, and plenty more to keep that high country stoke alive while the long days last. As we wrap up today's journey, remember, the passes are open, the peaks are calling, and the whole season is stretched out ahead of us like a trail with no end in sight. So chase those big summer miles, soak in every hour of daylight, and keep climbing toward whatever's waiting above the next ridge. Until next time, my fellow hikers, happy hiking. This episode's music was created by Ketsa. Follow along with him on Instagram at Ketsa Music. This episode is brought to you by Ursa Minor Outfitters. Folks, I'm absolutely in love with my loon mug. It's handmade, it's an absolute piece of art. Whether it's at the office or at the house, people keep asking to check it out. If you're not a loon fan, they also have other beautiful mugs for wildlife fans of moose, bears, and eagles. They specialize in products highlighting the outdoors and local pride through quality design by local artists. They've even started expanding into items beyond mugs, like apparel, dog accessories, and soon candles and more. They also try to partner and highlight other small businesses, and in some cases, forego profits in lieu of charitable giving to help their community, such as the dog rescue. So check them out, ursaminooroutfitters.com, and enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order. And for our four-legged hiking partners, they also have a portable silicone dog bowl and also a sweet over-the-collar dog bandana. Go check them out, ursaminooroutfitters.com, and don't forget to enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order.